This is also really a real meditation on what happens when you other people, you know, in society, when you ostracize them, when you deny them of community, of support, of infrastructure, of love.
What It Feels Like for a Girl is absolutely incredible. Must watch television. Every single person in this country, on this planet, needs to watch it because it's so thought provoking in so many ways. But above all, your performance in it is so epic. And for this to be one of your first big major leading roles on TV is just extraordinary because you're in every single scene. It's a really long series as well. Like each episode is about 45 minutes long. So you had to really do the work there. But I want to know where you were when this role first found you. Where were you at in life when this role found you?
Well, I had read the book very early on in my queer life, I guess, as though I had like came out. I hadn't, but I never ever had a community of like queer friends ever in my life. Until the show actually. And so I'd read the book and I'd felt so incredibly seen by this book, Josh. I was like, oh my God. I'd loved Paris and been such a fan of hers. And then I'd found out they were making it into a telly show. And I was like, oh my God, I have to be, first of all, I can't believe the BBC are making this. And then I was like, I have to be involved in some way, in any way possible that I can be. So I'd actually met them, first of all, to be a writer on it. I was just like, oh my God, how do I get involved? I feel like there are so many points where my life and this character's life meet. I feel like I could be a real like addition here to this writing process, but I couldn't do it. I was doing a play. I was doing To Kill a Mockingbird in the West End, and it just couldn't happen. And then they were auditioning for like 9 months. And then they didn't even ask me to audition at first. They asked me whether I would come in and have a chat about it, to just talk about it. And I was like, yes, absolutely. Yes, I will.
I'll be there immediately. I'm dropping everything.
And then I went in and look, I'm not like Anne Hathaway, you know, they didn't roll out the red carpet for me and be like, this is yours. They put me through like 5 rounds of excruciating auditions and really like run me through the ringer. And I think at that point, if I'm honest about where I was at in my life, my writing career had been going so well and I'd just done the play, yes, but I didn't, if I'm honest, I was trying to figure out who I was. And I feel like sometimes in this industry, one has to like present a version of themselves. And I was thinking, oh, am I this like scrappy working class Scouse kid? Am I this sensitive, like queer kid who reads like Maggie Nelson and listens to Rain, you know what I mean? And like wears knitted cardigans, and like who am I and what am I trying to give and sell, you know, in this industry? And then this part came along and it kind of demands you bring all of yourself, you know. And so I just felt like, whoa, I never envisioned a part like this to come along in my career, I guess at an early point in my career still. And then I was just like, I felt absolute euphoria when I got it. And then obviously I felt like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. And then an hour later, I was like, oh my God, now I'm fucking terrified because I've got to do it. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God. And then I was like, oh God, how the hell am I going to do 8 hours of television in every single scene? In an accent, like just going on what is like, really do you think this real odyssey of a journey, you know? So that's what I was at. I guess I was at a crossroads in my life. And then this show, this part came along and really bulldozed it into a path now, which I think is honestly like of renewed authenticity, of friendship around this cast. And I do think there's something about playing someone who is outrageous and authentic that kind of trains you to be yourself. And so I feel like I met the part at a really important moment in my life, you know, and my queer life.
Then you're meeting Paris for the first time. What were some really incredible conversations you had with her in prep for this that really stuck with you?
So it was about the conversations that we had, but also it was about her energy and it was about the way she navigated the world. I really felt like she is a real like a force of nature. I mean, you know her, Josh. You've met her. She's incredibly her tongue is so fast and she's so smart, and it's a real Rolodex of like cultural history. You know what she goes through, and she's incredibly like subversive and cheeky. And I just thought, oh my God, I wish I could embody myself the way she embodies herself. So it was also about not just the conversations we had, but it was about honestly, really, how she like navigated the world. When was I think the first time I met her was we met at Paddington train station, and I literally, she felt like Moses part in the Red Sea as she just strutted towards me, and I was like, whoa. I was like, here is a woman really in the center of her life, you know. And so I think I took as much from her, just like witnessing her and being in the presence of her, as I did from the conversations. But I think what I took from what we spoke about, I guess like growing up poor and queer, and feeling like so much of your early queer experiences don't exist in spaces that are safe, you know, that are spaces which are incredibly transgressive and dangerous. And I feel like, because Paris is so honest about that, it does give you the license also to kind of interrogate who you are, and what you have been through, you know, in a way that I just hadn't really before this project. And I think one of the things which I was so um I don't know, enlightened by, maybe to not sound like cliche, but like you've seen, you know, at the beginning of the series, the show isn't shy about Paris's about, you know, the Byron's experiences early on in terms of like, you know, grooming underage, like sex for rent, and what the show and what Paris does, which I was so probably the most important conversation we ever had, is that Paris didn't know it was abuse at the time, you know, and I felt like it really opened up this idea for me of, whoa, one doesn't need to, one can look back retrospectively and go, hang on, these things were not right that happened to me, and you don't need to have all of the answers in the moment, you know. And I think she is so, I think mostly I've been so enamored by how honest and brave she is in telling what is an incredibly difficult and nuanced story, and never shying away from both the trauma and the triumph of that.
What It Feels Like for a Girl comes out a very difficult time for the trans community, and this is a trans story. It's a figuring yourself out story as well, but it is fundamentally a trans story. What kind of conversations do you hope this starts for the trans community?
I mean, I don't want to chaperone like anyone to like come to any sort of conclusions. And look, I don't have trans experience, so I don't want to be like, this is what the trans, you know. But I think as someone else, like someone who doesn't have trans experience, I think what actually is an interesting thing to, what I would love to come out of this is what I said earlier, which is about like, why do we build a society that ostracizes people? You know, there's a great line in episode 5, which is, when you force people into the shadows, don't be surprised when they go fucking dark, you know. And I think you know, this show is a historical piece, I guess, in some way. I mean, it doesn't feel like it's you know, it's set in 2000. I'm sure there'll be people listening to this be like, 2000 is not historical, you know. But I think hopefully what it does is it serves a reminder to those who need that reminder, which is that trans people have always existed and they will continue to exist, you know, beyond this current very precarious political moment. I also feel so lucky, Josh, to be part of a show which humanizes a you know, one person's trans experience, you know, and to do that in a way which has like real magnetism and color and comedy, and hopefully provide some sort of like, whilst it does go to like, you know, very dark and dangerous places, the series, I do also think it has also a real like life and like joie de vie to it, you know. It's also about like these this young like ragtag gang of like misfits being unapologetically themselves and racing through the underworld of Nottingham, you know, skanking and shagging and doing all of the things, you know. And so I hope it also provides some like comedy and some relief at this time.
I think sometimes when you're growing up queer, you sometimes wonder if you will ever get to the point of feeling proud of yourself. What was your coming out journey like?
Hell, Josh, it was hell. It's so interesting you say that. I had an image of myself. I must have been about, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 or something like that. I was in primary school and I used to cut my fringe. I wanted it so straight like a bullet train. And my nan had passed away like a year or two earlier. And I would pray to her, Josh. I was like, I just don't want to be gay. I just like, please stop. And I would be like, please, 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 I just don't want to be this anymore. And I just don't want to feel, maybe I didn't even have language for like queerness, but I knew I was different, and I knew that wasn't a good thing. Well, I felt like that, you know, at that age. I just felt like, oh, this isn't going to be good for me where I am here. I don't know whether cutting the fringe straight was a marker of queerness or a marker of straightness. I don't know whether I was that evolved yet, but I think being in front of the mirror, being like, come on, love, you're not going to be queer anymore. It was a bit paradoxical, perhaps. But I would, you know, I would really try to suppress it. I think, you know, probably hard to think about now, sitting talking to me, but I would bick my dad is bald, and I would bick my head bald. I would drop my voice, and I would be like one of these Scouse kids, and I would, you know, try and do that. And I just try to run away from myself at 100 miles an hour. And I was so scared. I came out so late. I came out at, I mean, look, there's no timeline for authenticity, and I feel like I'm still, you know, figuring out who I am. Um, but I came out in my early 20s, um, which I'm always so bowled over by people who come out when they're 14, 15, you know. I'm like, God, the confidence and resilience you have. And I felt like, it's so weird. I felt like I had that confidence and resilience in so many other aspects of my life. But I feel like when you are totally forcing something down, it kind of forces you to be really outspoken, because it's like, don't look at this like creature in the corner. So I was the first one on a protest. I was the first one to like argue back, you know. I was never scared of things, because I was trying to be like, look out, like, look how openly I live my life. Don't ask me about my sexuality, you know. And then look, it was rough. I told my dad I didn't speak to him for near on a year, I don't think. Um, and it was I had a real, that my family life broke down in that way. Um, but my friendships came and they flourished. And Tahib, actually, God, he's getting a lot of airtime. He's getting a lot of free press today, Tahib, on this podcast. He's going to be made up. He doesn't have to pay his publicist for the month. No, he said to me, Godel, I am so proud of you that you have, like, that you are, you know, choosing to like, I don't know, to be honest and to explore this thing that, you know. And he was like, I wish I had that confidence. I think because we've had so many points of our lives so we felt like they mirrored, and I felt like he understood, although he's not queer. But just that, even saying that when you come from a background where I came from, is, you know, it can be dangerous. And then, but also, I say all of this to say I didn't speak to my dad for, I think, just over a year. And then I brought my then boyfriend home for the first time, and my big sister sat my dad down and said, if you don't meet Ellis's partner, you will never have this experience again. He will never have his first time bringing someone home again. And if you miss this, it will be, you know, colossal. And then he didn't. He turned up. We had the best night ever, and he was incredible. And ever since then, he's been completely, you know, one of my biggest supporters, cheerleaders. He can't wait to come and see the show. You know, God, I could get upset. And and look, these things are so incredibly difficult still. And whilst we get more visibility, I hope that we can still acknowledge that not everyone's coming out journey is still easy in this, you know, current political climate. And also, families are difficult, they're tricky, you know, and they come with their own baggage. And so I definitely had to navigate all of that. But if I'm honest, as difficult as it was, I wouldn't change it. I think now I have such a more honest relationship with both my parents because I'm just meeting them for who I am now. Um, and I feel like they can actually fall in love with who I really am, you know, and in turn I can meet them more honestly. And so whilst it was really difficult and precarious, and I thought, oh God, maybe I just won't have a relationship with them at some point. Now I have the best relationship I've ever had with them, and they'll be at the premiere next week, and they'll be screaming their heads off. They'll probably get pissed. They'll probably do headstands, you know, in the bar afterwards, and
They'll be doing the most.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't really talk about the intersections between queer identity and working class identity, and it can be savage. There's so much bullying on that way as well, isn't there?
It's brutal. It can be completely brutal, and I think, like, also, like, men are raised in oftentimes working class backgrounds. I mean, Liverpool, you know, it's the docks. It's like there is like you're trying to be built into a version of a man who's going to go out and work in a very specific industry and that has characteristics. Like my dad, when he was like, I don't know, 8, 9, they tied him to a lamppost and kicked footballs at him until he got tough. You know, there's a lineage of like, we will make you a boy, you know, you will, you will, I don't know, conform or live up to this expectation we have of the male identity. And you see it. I felt it so strongly growing up, and I conformed to it too. I felt like, you know, as queer people, we're also so good at code switching, you know, which is like, okay, what do you want from me in this moment? Oh, you want this working class rough, you know, Scouse kid? You're gonna get it, you know. If I'm in a pub and Liverpool is playing, you know, at 12 years old, you know, I'm gonna really give it to you what you need here. But equally, if I'm at home at my, you know, nan or something, and we've got Liza and Judy Garland, you know, on the television, it's like, oh, great.
You're giving.
Yeah, I'm giving. I'm saving.
You're giving.
I'm like, put like, yeah, things in my hair, spikes. I want to look like Gareth Gates, and I want to do a high kick. You know, I like that. Would like jumping through those things. I think there's also a thing of like, it can really, you know, make you be transformative in your life because you do have to navigate what are oftentimes very hostile, very, you know, violent scenarios. I mean, look at Byron in the show, you know, that's absolutely a source of code switching. You see that in the way Byron presents, and also who gets to be authentic, who gets to live, you know, a liberated life. It's difficult, and sometimes the price you pay in backgrounds where we've grown up is safety, you know. But for some people, they can swallow that cost a bit faster than others. And I'm not embarrassed to say that I had to come to London. I had to fortify myself with people, and then I had to go back to Liverpool with my hair in a bun, my earrings out, and be like, look, gang, I'm queer, you know. But now I go back, and hopefully I can be that for my niece. My niece is 3.5. My big sister will kill me for not knowing her exact age. And she just watched the trailer for What It Feels Like for a Girl, and she was like, is Ellis kissing a boy? And my big sister was like, yes. And she was like, and how do you feel about that? She was like, oh my God, that's so funny. That's gorgeous. Are they going to get married? And I was like, oh, out the mouth of babes. I was like, come on, girl. She's going to throw the next brick at Stonewall, my 3-year-old niece. You know what I mean? I like these things are absolutely learned, you know, like hate, you know, fear, all of these things are learned behaviors. And that is a good thing to know because they can be unlearned.
And that's so special. Your 3.5-year-old niece in her Elsa dress is out there campaigning for queer rights.
Yeah, giving it all. She's marching on that Supreme Court, and she's like, not on my watch.